Good evening. It's David Keefe. I'm the president of EDF Action. Thank you guys so much for being here with us. I'm sorry it's dark here. I'm in my family minivan. We had some connectivity or some childcare issues relating to the New Hampshire primary, which is tonight. But I'm so excited to be here. I wouldn't want to miss this. This is our kickoff for 2024 with you all, our grassroots volunteers. We're going to talk through our priorities for the year. We're going to talk through our advocacy priorities, like making sure that we protect all of those great climate smart agriculture investments that were part of the Inflation Reduction Act during the reauthorization of the Farm Bill, and all the hard work we're doing to push back against some of the bad votes that are being had on electric vehicles. We're also probably going to spend a little bit of time talking about some of our electoral advocacy priorities. But the through line for all of that is each and every one of you. The work that our EDF Action is only as strong as our grassroots volunteers. And together we can do huge, important things. The thing last year, 2023, that made me more excited than anything else was seeing all of those beautiful EDF Action Unite for Climate placards and all of our staff and volunteers on the ground in the state capital of Lansing in Michigan, as Michigan passed its first ever clean energy law that's going to get them to net zero. You guys did that, our members on the ground in Michigan. So all across this country, EDF Action's members, we're going to need you to step up in a really big way, because this is an absolutely critical year to defend our progress. I believe deeply that this is an inflection point, and that if we can get past this year and keep pushing on all of our priorities, that we're going to pass a tipping point, and the progress that we've made so far on climate is going to be cemented for the rest of history. So we need every single person out there to dig a little bit deeper, but also to know how much all of us at EDF Action, me especially included, appreciate all of your work. And that if we're going to ask you to give up some of your evenings, some of your afternoon, some of your weekend, that we think it's for a really good cause. And it's because we know that the type of people power that you guys bring and that we bring together makes a tremendous difference. Thanks so much.
Thank you, David. Welcome to everyone who's joining us. Appreciate you being here with us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or watching after the event. Thank you so much. I'm Jeremy Pittman, Senior Director for Grassroots Engagement at EDF Action, and I'm excited to be here today to discuss our priorities for 2024. We have a big year ahead of us and a lot of work to do to move forward our critical goals. Today's program will start with an overview of our priorities for 2024 and victories from 2023. We'll discuss legislative, regulatory, and electoral work. After that, my colleague Annabelle Maldonado will moderate a panel discussion to dive deeper into our core priorities, why they matter, and how you can help. Then we'll wrap up and share some ways for you to get involved today. If you have questions throughout the program, please put them in the comments on the social media platform that you're tuning in from. So let's start with an overview of what our top priorities are for this year and what we accomplished last year. So quickly, I want to run through a few of the things that are our highest priorities for this year. This year, we'll be looking to advance strong legislation that protects our climate and advances clean energy. We'll work to secure the strongest possible clean air and climate protections from the Biden administration, and we'll work to elect climate champions. So when we look at these in depth, we're thinking about 2023 and 2024 in the legislative arena. In 2023, we saw more than $200 billion in new clean energy investments from the Inflation Reduction Act roll out to key programs that will support the clean energy transition. We also saw over $400 million in federal funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law, known as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, that went to clean energy programs nationwide. And as David mentioned in his introduction, we saw some great action at the state level in Michigan, in Minnesota, where both states passed huge new climate laws to advance the clean energy transition, and in a handful of other states as well, where key advances were made. So what's on tap for this year? In 2024, We'll be looking to pass a climate smart farm bill. The farm bill is up for authorization every 5 years. And this year we have a key opportunity to advance climate smart policies as part of the farm bill. We'll be looking to protect Environmental Protection Agency standards from congressional rollbacks. We'll be looking to protect the key federal climate investments from the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law that some are looking to roll back. And finally, we'll be looking to solidify strong funding for federal agencies that are working on climate and clean energy priorities through the federal appropriations process. In terms of the regulatory agenda, last year, the Biden administration finalized strong pollution safeguards against oil and gas industry methane pollution. This is a really big deal, the first time ever that we've seen these standards for oil and gas industry methane pollution. And they also finalized what's known as the Good Neighbor Plan, which protects millions of people who live downwind from smokestack pollution. This year, there's a lot on the regulatory agenda, and we're looking for the Biden administration to finalize a strong protective standard to limit soot pollution, finalize climate pollution standards for our transportation sector for light duty and heavy duty vehicles, and to finalize strong anti-pollution standards for power plants. And then on the electoral front, in 2023, it was not an election. There were not elections everywhere, but there were some key elections. So we worked at EDF Action to support local climate champions in Virginia, which did have elections for state legislature. So including folks like State Senator Danica Rome, and in some local races like Fairfax County Supervisor Andres Jimenez. We also worked in a key special election in Virginia to help elect Virginia's first Black Congresswoman, Jennifer McClellan, who is taking a key lead on matters of the environment in the House of Representatives in her first term. And we supported Supreme Court Justice Janet Protasiewicz in a race for the balance of power in Wisconsin's highest court. Again, there weren't elections everywhere, but where there were elections that were consequential for our climate and clean energy future, we wanted to get involved, and we were able to make a difference in some of these key races. And in 2024, we'll talk a lot more about this when we go in depth, but we're going to need all hands on deck to elect climate champion candidates at every level of government this November. And with that, I want to again remind you, if you have questions throughout the conversation, to please enter them into the chat in your social media platform. And I'm going to now hand it over to Annabelle Maldonado to get us going with our panel discussion. Annabelle.
Hi, folks. Good evening, afternoon. I'm sitting here in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm the Director of Political Programs for the Southwest, and happy to be joining my colleagues today. So, Reggie, why don't we do a quick round of intros and we'll get into the conversation.
Sure. Thank you so much, Annabelle, and hi, everyone. I'm Reggie Peros, and I'm the Senior Director of Campaigns for EDF Action. And I work with Jeremy and David and Annabelle to lead all of our advocacy campaigns here in Washington, D.C. and in states around the country.
Well, thank you both. I know this work is really critical and comes, at a pivotal moment in our history. So let's just dive in. We just heard Jeremy talk about some administrative rules and standards, and would love to hear from you, Reggie. Kind of walk us through the process of what is a rule and how do these really impact folks on the day to day, like these rules being made in DC. How does it affect my family in South Phoenix?
Yeah, absolutely. So rules are really important safeguards that are put into place by federal agencies to protect public health, the environment, and our climate. They establish limits that polluters aren't allowed to exceed, and they help reduce pollution from a variety of sources. For example, cars, trucks, power plants, and from the oil and gas industry. At the end of the day, these safeguards help ensure that we are holding polluters accountable and protecting the air that we breathe and the water that we drink. And the Biden administration has made it their top priority to finish as many of these safeguards this year as possible.
so important, especially, when I see kind of the mountain of clouds of all the pollution in I'm assuming all of the country, but especially in Phoenix, I think it hits close to home. Well, we're certainly really proud of all the progress that's been made on, federal climate policy with the passage of these huge bills, the Inflation Reduction Act, bipartisan infrastructure law. I know that's been a monumental movement, and a lot of folks put a lot of time. But can you tell us kind of what you anticipate the congressional climate to be, this session? Is there possibility for more action? What legislative opportunities do you see in 2024 that we should, be sharing with our volunteers?
Absolutely. And in short, the answer is yes. Climate progress is absolutely still possible this Congress. And in particular, we have two critical opportunities that I'm extremely excited about advocating for this year. First, we have to protect, like you said, the climate wins included in the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act. That means we have to encourage members of Congress through the appropriations process to fight for strong funding for federal agencies that are working on climate and clean energy projects, and also ensuring that no poison pills are included in these bills that would hamper the good work that these agencies are doing. The second is we have to pass a climate smart farm bill. The Inflation Reduction Act made significant investments in conservation and climate programs that help farmers reduce pollution and keep their farms resilient to the impacts from climate change. Agriculture contributes 10% of US greenhouse gas emissions, and extreme weather, like hurricanes, floods, droughts, and wildfires, stress crops and livestock, and eventually make some crops impossible to grow. This farm bill is a critical opportunity to protect and build on these investments and ensure that farmers have the tools they need to lead the transition to more sustainable food production. And so those are just two of the main opportunities that I am really excited to continue advocating for this Congress.
Yeah, I love the emphasis on building on the good wins that we already had. I think that's critical for us to, the mindset for us to be in, not just as staffers, but volunteers, that there's just so much more to go from here. Now turning it to you, Jeremy, I'm sure you all have had the 2024 elections at the top of your mind. We're well underway already. But Jeremy, would love to know from you kind of what races we're watching in 2024 as EDF Action, and overall how you think this election will impact the future of climate progress. I know there's a lot at stake.
Yeah, thanks, Annabelle. Well, you're right. It's all on the line this year. Everything hangs in the balance. And there's a lot of focus right now, as there should be, on the presidential election. It's on a lot of people's minds. As we speak right now, polls are closing for New Hampshire primary voters. So a lot of focus and attention on the presidential election. And make no doubt, it will be incredibly consequential. We remember that when President Trump was in office, he undid years of negotiation and hard work to pull the United States out of the Paris Climate Agreement, which is a stark difference from President Biden, who pushed Congress to pass the largest ever investments to address climate change, support resilience, and tackle environmental injustice. So we know that there's a lot at stake in the presidential election. But that's not all. There is so much else on the ballot this year. There are 34 US Senate seats up for election, which will determine control of the United States Senate. All 435 US House seats are up for election this year, which will determine control of the US House. There are 11 governorships up for election this year. There are state legislative elections in 44 states and thousands of local elections, and at least a handful of environment-related ballot measures. So a lot of things for folks to be thinking about as we head into this election year. And as I said, it's all on the line. The presidency makes a huge difference, of course, but control of the US House, control of the US Senate, that makes a huge difference as well. Will the US House and US Senate be controlled by climate champions or by people who will stand in the way of climate progress. That is what's at stake here. And when I look at the specific races, there are a lot of really interesting races to watch out there. I'll be watching the races of folks who were key votes for the climate investments in the Inflation Reduction Act, who are in swing states and districts. And there are a lot of those folks out there, folks who have been champions on our issues, who are going to face tough re-election campaigns. I think of folks like Senator Sherrod Brown in Ohio, Jackie Rosen in Nevada, and Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin, and Representatives Susan Wild and Cartwright in Pennsylvania. So a lot of key races in places all around the country that we're going to be looking at. In addition, there are a number of competitive races for seats that are held by representatives who have been hostile to the clean energy transition. Especially, there are some key races coming up that could be competitive in California and New York. I know there may be lots of folks on the watching tonight who are in California and New York who often don't think that there's much at stake in their elections because they're so because they're perhaps one-sided. That's not going to be the case this year. There are going to be a lot of competitive races, especially U.S. House races in California and New York, that could make all the difference this year. So that's what I'll be looking at.
And can you expand a little more on those key races, right? I think about those folks that took the hard vote and voted for, this monumental, funds. Can you talk more about the defense of Bill and Ira and their context to the elections that we're watching?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right, Annabelle, that there are folks out there who took tough votes. I think most of them didn't think they were tough votes because they believe in what we're doing here. So, when someone like Senator Jackie Rosen in Nevada, took the vote to support the Inflation Reduction Act, that I think, she thinks that was an easy vote to take. It was the right vote. It was an easy vote to take because she's been a champion on our issues for a long time and has really been working to position Nevada as a leader in the clean energy economy. We know that Nevada has lots of sunshine and should really be a leader in this transition to clean energy and clean transportation. And Senator Rosen has been there for years and years, working to help get us to the point where we could pass a law like the Inflation Reduction Act that included hundreds of billions of dollars of federal funding to support the transition to clean energy and transportation. So Senator Rosen took that vote, and now we need to really be, we need to get behind her efforts and our shared efforts to showcase the benefits that are coming from these investments. As I said, the Inflation Reduction Act represents the largest ever government investment in addressing climate change. And, we know that, but unfortunately, a lot of Americans don't know that. And so we are working, side by side with members of Congress, with folks in the Biden administration, and with advocates for clean energy and for us to address the climate crisis all across the country to really lift up the stories of these investments and how they're making a difference for everyday Americans. And we know that, as these funds make their way out into the country and into the economy, they will do tremendous work to accelerate the clean energy transition, helping churches and nonprofits put solar panels on their roof, helping people replace their inefficient water heaters and furnaces with more efficient water heaters and heat pumps. Like, this is the kind of thing that's happening all over the country that we really need to help showcase so that voters understand the work that's happening and how it's benefiting Americans across the board, not just for our climate, but for the bottom line and for all the jobs it's creating. So really, really consequential results are happening as a result of these votes that members of Congress took. And now, as we stand behind them, we really have to work to help showcase the benefits that are happening across the country for all the folks on this call and everyone who who has a car, has a house, has a stake in to getting us to a better place on the climate.
Thank you. Yeah, we have to show up for those folks. It's make it or break it this year. And on that thread, this question is for both of you. Maybe $1 million question that many organizations, I think, deal with. In a moment of really divided politics and partisan politics, and given that kind of climated atmosphere within Congress and in state legislatures, how can we move climate progress forward given this divide? We know that, we want to elect climate champions, but, there's instances like in Arizona, right, where it's just a very partisan legislature. And so how do we really move climate progress forward given kind of that division amongst our elected officials and just, general electorate?
Well, I can start here, and then Reggie, you can follow me. But I think that first, I think we have to keep talking about it. We know that when folks talk about climate change with their family, friends, and neighbors, it makes a difference. So I encourage folks on this call to continue talking about climate with your family, friends, and neighbors. And then I also think that it's important that maybe climate is a concept that doesn't resonate for everyone, and in fact, some folks, when you mention climate, it will turn them off immediately, and that's certainly true for some folks that we'd like to have on our side, that we know we need. And so thinking about, well, how can we come to common ground? What's the language we can use that we share? And so thinking about, Annabelle, Arizona, where you are, I think maybe not everybody can get behind climate action, even though that's what we think. We love the words climate action, but not everybody can get behind that. But I think a lot of people in Arizona can get behind the notion that we need to be thinking about and addressing extreme heat and drought and other issues that are really hitting home for Arizonans. And I think that when you go to the Southeast and the Gulf Coast, people are concerned about sea level rise and flooding. In the Midwest, there have been a lot of flooding and extreme weather events. So I think really starting to think about how we can talk to folks across the partisan divide about the issues that matter to them. And in so many cases, I think these issues are clear. We know what they are, and we just have to be willing to really open up the way that we think about the work in front of us, and be willing to go to a place where we're talking to folks about issues that we share, issues of concern that we share. Reggie, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Jeremy, I agree with a lot that you just said. We have to continue talking to our friends and neighbors. We have to continue using our voice to talk to politicians and members of Congress. And importantly, we also have to tell our stories. I mean, like you said, I grew up on the Gulf Coast of Florida, and I can remember vividly one of the worst hurricanes that my family ever went through. It flooded our entire town. And that image sticks in my mind. And whenever I tell other people that story, it puts them in that place. And I talk about how that made me feel and how that made my family feel. And we felt scared. And we were scared not only for, our house and for our neighbors' houses, but also for the future of our communities. And like, using that language and using storytelling to really try to convey, how climate change knows no bounds. It doesn't know party lines. It doesn't know geographical boundaries. It's impacting everybody on the planet. And so being able to find those common threads and really make it personal and say, this was my own personal experience. I'm sure everyone has some sort of anecdote about how extreme weather has impacted their life in one form or another, or how, a changing climate or an experience, being out in nature and in the environment has impacted them. And so just trying to find those common narratives and those common threads, I really think is an important way of trying to break down those partisan divides in this heated climate.
Absolutely. I think of all the times that I've been canvassing and sometimes in very, conservative areas, rural areas in Arizona, which is very much outside of my element, given I live in, Phoenix Metro. So yeah, I think that's going to be a huge part of us being able to win and shift those narratives, right? Of like just talking to your neighbor about, the water crisis in Arizona, or the pollution and your kid's asthma, and really making that human to human connection is gonna make us move forward as a country. Well, I would also love to hear from you. I know that you work with a bunch of national partners, and sit at a bunch of coalition tables and work with lawmakers, like you said, and obviously our EDF Action members and activists. What are you hearing from people? How are folks talking about climate change in the context not only of this election, but just kind of the moment that we're in as a country and globally?
Yeah, I mean, climate change still remains a top concern for everyone I talk to, whether it's, my family back home in Florida, my friends here in DC, or people that I see in, lawmakers in Congress and in the Biden administration. And, fortunately, a lot of the topics have been around the good progress that we've made in the past few years through the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law. But a common thread is that there is still so much work to be done. We have to protect the strong safeguards that the Biden administration and federal agencies are putting into place. We have to invest more funds and more effort into building a zero emission economy. And importantly, we have to help communities be resilient to unavoidable climate impacts. And those are things that we hear across the spectrum. Last year was I think the warmest year on record. And we continue to see, record heat, record extreme weather, hurricanes and droughts impacting all areas of the country and the globe. And so climate change continues to remain a top concern, even though it's an election year and even though Congress is as divided as it is.
Yeah, I think that's right. I know that when we look at the polling that's out there, recently our friends at the Yale Program on Climate Change Communications released their latest set of surveys. And they show that 2/3 of Americans say they are at least somewhat worried about climate change. And 1 in 10 has reported having anxiety about climate in the past 2 weeks. So we know it's a big concern for a lot of folks out there. And that's true across the board. Folks who are everyday Americans, but those concerns are shared by our elected officials. They're shared by people working in advocacy. So I think everyone has these concerns, and the question becomes, what do we do about it? Sometimes these problems can feel so big. This is a monumental challenge that we face, that it's hard to think about what the solutions are. But I have to say, I know we've faced big challenges before. We, in the United States, have done amazing things. We've confronted global dictators. We've put men on the moon. We've done so many things. I have to believe that we can tackle this crisis as well.
And on that, because it can feel so daunting for folks, what words of inspiration or hope would you give our EDF Action members, partners, to continue this fight?
I mean, I would just say that, I'm inspired by all of you. There are many days in working in climate advocacy that are just really hard and really heavy. And I still get inspired by people, public servants who are working hard day in and day out in Congress and state and federal agencies all across the country to try to prioritize science-based climate action. And people just like you, all on this call, who volunteer and take time out of your busy days to show up and take climate action. We really can't tackle climate change without people. And all of you and your dedication to this work and people around the country really keep me optimistic about the future and about the work that we're able to do. So I would just say, keep it up. You guys are all an inspiration to me.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's a lot to be gained from the community of fellowship that we have as folks who are working to address the climate crisis. So thank you all for the work that you're doing. One of the things that I took a lot of inspiration from last year, and that I hope we can continue again this year, is a partnership that we at EDF Action had last summer with our friends at a group called Climate Change Makers. And they're a really amazing group, and I hope many of you who are watching today or part of this program, we're part of that partnership as well. But their model, their mantra is about an hour of action every week. And the best antidote to the bigness of the climate crisis and the challenge that we face is putting in an hour every week. And if you can do that, and maybe you don't have an hour every week, but if you can do an hour of action every month, if you can put in an hour of action, it can make a huge difference. And it definitely makes you feel better. So that's how I stay optimistic, is by, continuing the work, putting in those hours. And I believe that together we will make a difference. We will bend the arc and get to a place where we are addressing the climate crisis with the scale and speed that are necessary. We're not there. We have work to do, but we can get there together.
We've come so far. We just need to continue expanding our movement, sharing our stories. And one of the things that I always think about in terms of all these investments and federal rules is, how does it, like I started the meeting, how does it impact my neighborhood? How does it impact my family? And I think viewing such a big, daunting thing from that lens, I think can help us start chipping away at it, and let that be motivation for each and every one of you when you're calling voters, when you're knocking on doors, and when you're inviting people to join our movement. So that is it for my questions. Jeremy, Reggie, I don't know if you have any parting thoughts or anything else you would like to share.
Thanks, Annabelle. I don't know if we had any questions come in from folks who are watching, but if we did, we'd be happy to take some of those. Or maybe we already did that. So I will move then to just say that in 2023, our victories would not have been possible without our nationwide network of amazing volunteers and EDF Action members. Many of you helped us advance clean energy legislation, elect climate champions, and secure strong anti-pollution standards through the Biden administration. And we simply couldn't do this without you. The power of people coming together to reach our goals is how real change is made. And when we laid out what we're up to this year, those are big things. Trying to advance strong anti-pollution standards through the Biden administration, advance a climate-smart farm bill, and of course, elect climate champions. These are big, big things that are going to require a lot of time and energy. So I'm just so thankful for all the time and energy that folks have committed. And I know that in 2024, we'll need you to step up and take action with us on all three of our core priorities to help us secure legislative action, regulatory action, and electoral victories. So I'm asking today if you can commit to joining us to take action this year. We have a link on the screen, and it may be dropped into your into the chat on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter. But this link is a simple survey asking what kind of action you're willing to step up for this year. We hope that you'll be willing to join us as we look to make critical advances to secure the strongest possible anti-pollution standards from the Biden administration, to ensure that the Farm Bill is passed with climate smart provisions, to ensure that federal agencies that work on climate and clean energy are fully funded to do that work. And of course, to ensure that we elect climate champions up and down the ballot. So I hope you'll join us. We'll be following up for sure. So please fill out the survey, join us at EDF Action, and we'll look forward to an exciting and event-filled year together. With that, I want to say thank you for tuning in today for this conversation on the year ahead. I've learned a lot from this conversation, and I love being part of this discussion. And I want to thank our EDF Action President, David Kiva, for kicking us off, and thank Annabelle and Reggie for the conversation that we've had. Please follow us on social media to hear more about what we're up to and sign up for additional events and volunteer opportunities. It's going to be an incredibly impactful and busy year, and we look forward to going through this year with you. Thank you.